Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Sports Spectrum podcast. I am Jason Romano. Excited about our guest Howard Johnson today, two-time Major League Baseball All-Star, longtime New York Mets, 1986-1984 World Series champion. Before we get to our conversation with Howard, I want to tell you a little bit about our sponsors, new partners here at Sports Spectrum, Ronald Blue Trust. We're talking about wealth management strategies and trust services based on biblical principles. I'm going to tell you more about Ronald Blue Trust in a little bit, but for now, I want you to check out their website, ronblue.com, ronblue.com, and learn more about how they do work to help you in your financial endeavors. ronblue.com. Today on the show, we welcome Howard Johnson, two-time World Series champion, two-time Major League Baseball All-Star, to Sports Spectrum. Hojo, selected in the first round of the 1979 MLB Draft by the Tigers, 12th overall, makes his Major League debut 3 years later and plays 3 seasons with the Tigers before he's traded to the New York Mets. And that's where he would really make his mark as a major leaguer from 1985 to 1993 with the New York Mets. In that span, a two-time All-Star, a World Series champion in 1986, the National League home run and RBI leader in 1991, and a 3-time member of the 30-30 Club. 30 homers, 30 stolen bases. He did it in 1987, 1989, and 1991. He would retire after the 1995 season and go into coaching, and he'd work his way up the minor league trails all the way up back to the majors, back with the Mets in 2007, where he would coach from 2007 to 2011. And this past season in 2019, he was the hitting coach for the AAA Nashville Sounds. This interview was recorded before the coronavirus outbreak and the pandemic, so this interview obviously will not be discussing that, and certainly the Major League Baseball season here in 2020 being put on pause. But we do have a really great conversation with Hojo, reminiscing, and as a Mets fan, I'm a longtime New York Mets fan, this was a treat for me to talk some New York Mets baseball with Howard Johnson. And surprisingly for me, he was very candid and very transparent about some things that he's walked through in his faith journey, both within the New York Mets clubhouse as a player, but even after his time playing, and just the struggles that so many of us face as we drift away a little bit from God. But I think you'll really like this conversation with Howard Johnson, the two-time World Series champion, joining us here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Take a listen. They call him Hojo, and as a kid who grew up in New York, rooting for the New York Mets, of course, I remember number 20, and now another number 20 is doing pretty well with the Mets.
Yeah,
Howard Johnson,
sure.
Welcome to Sports Spectrum.
Jason, thanks for having me.
What's that? I guess maybe we'll go there first. You're seeing another number 20 wearing that number in Citi Field and for the Mets and just doing amazing things. Pete Alonso this year. What was your perceptions? I know you were a AAA coach this year in Nashville, but watching what Alonso did as a fan, I'm 46 now. I've watched the Mets since I was 10 years old. Never seen anything like that. One season from one player, especially in his first full season. What did you think of it?
Well, I would think every veteran guy would say, be careful, Pete. They're going to expect that every year.
I know, especially in New York, right?
But I've never met Pete, but I know a lot of people who have, who are very impressed by the guy.
Yeah.
I'd love to meet the guy. He's from Florida. I believe we went to UF.
Yeah.
We have the same jersey number.
Yeah.
And we're both Bucks fans.
There you go.
We check a lot of boxes together, so I'm pulling for the guy for sure.
Yeah, it was amazing to watch him kind of live up to the hype, but then even exceed it. And I know you had a lot of hype coming in as well in your career. You were a first-round draft pick way back in 1979 by the Detroit Tigers. You were the 12th pick overall at 19 years old. So Let's go way back, I guess, and start there. What was that like? What memories come to mind when you think back to 1979 and being drafted as such a young player coming out of high school?
Yeah, coming out of high school. Well,
yeah.
I'll tell you the story. Actually, I was coming out of junior college because back in those days, they had two drafts. They had a June draft, which I was drafted by the Yankees. I think 26th round, something like that. And then if you didn't sign, you belonged to that team until a January draft.
Okay.
So the team that drafted you in June could sign you, and if they didn't, you went back into the January draft in this thing called the secondary phase. And that's where the Tigers picked me. So I had gone to junior college at St. Pete Junior College for a semester, played the fall, and then the Yankees said, well, we're not going to sign you right now. Why don't you continue playing, and we'll revisit it later in the summer. And then so they put me back in the draft, and that's when the Tigers jumped in.
Were you obviously being a first-round pick or whatever level you want to say it versus 26th or 23rd or whatever it was with the Yankees, big difference. But you grew up in Florida, right?
Yep,
so
Clearwater.
Did you have the Yankees played there at training camp in Tampa? I think they've always been there.
Well, they were in Lauderdale at the time.
Lauderdale, okay.
Yeah.
So were you a Yankees fan growing up? Who was your team growing up?
No, not really. I was more of a Phillies fan.
Phillies?
Yeah, Philly, because they spring trained in Clearwater.
Yes, they do. That's right.
And I was a big Oakland fan. Just as a kid, they were winning all the time. And, I have memories of watching the World Series during the day.
Yeah,
during the school week, coming home from school, not going to school, watching the World Series, and watching Reggie Jackson and those guys get after it was all. That's my childhood, and just growing up, watching the Phillies and listening to them on the radio. Back in those days, there was only one channel that you could get baseball on. There wasn't a network game on Saturday, and that was on the UHF channel. Channel 44 down in Clearwater, and we used to get the Braves games on Channel 44. And then on the radio, I could listen to Harry Callis do the Philly games.
The legendary Harry
Callis. And I love that guy.
Yeah.
And when I got to meet him one time, I got to meet him finally in Philadelphia, and he signed a DVD for me that he had made about Veterans Stadium and the Phillies.
That's cool.
And that was a good memory for me. But so that's how I watched and listened to baseball.
So the Yankees. Was that something when you were picked by them where you're thinking, yeah, I'm all in? Or was this kind of like, let me just play a little community college and then maybe see what happens? Or did you think, okay, the Yankees, the pinstripes, let's go? What was that like?
Well, my first thought was, wow, I got drafted. I got a chance to go play professionally, which is what I've always wanted to do. And there's a big part of me that wanted to go play. But my scout that did draft me, I think their plan was to draft me, hold me. They would have sent me to Oneonta, which was their rookie club back then.
I know where that is. About an hour west of where I grew up in Albany.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Ooh, okay, well.
Not the biggest place in the world.
No, not the metropolis.
It's right outside of Cooperstown, actually.
Yeah, I've actually been in Oneonta. It's very nice.
Yeah.
And so he said, well, we're not going to offer you a ton of money. We'd like to sign you, but we think that it'd be better for you if you didn't sign and went on and played a semester of junior college and played more games and just go from there, and we could revisit it and see what happens.
Get some more reps.
Yeah, and that's what happened. And then when the time came up for me to sign with the Yankees or I'd become a free agent again, they said basically the same thing, just finish the year. We're going to put you back in the draft. If nobody claims you, then we have you still, and up until the next draft. So.
And Detroit claimed you.
Yeah, they did. They picked me, and it worked out great because I got a chance to go to spring training and make a team. They were very honest and said I had a chance to start out in High A, which was great. And that was in Lakeland, Florida, in the Florida State League. And I got a chance to make a team in spring training. And they were true to their word, and I did make that team out of spring training.
Yeah, you were 21 years old when you made your major league debut in 1982 with Detroit. Where's faith for you in all this? Where's your walk with God begin? And if it's not during this time, we can kind of fast forward through your baseball journey. But where is faith? You grew up in Florida. Where was that? Well,
I dated a pastor's daughter in high school.
Okay.
And so I guess my faith was I knew about Christ. I thought I accepted Christ. I felt like, God was doing a number on me. I was baptized and felt, it was a Baptist church, and And so I was very familiar with the word and thought I was a Christian, but it was more for me, I guess, it has become more fire insurance than anything. And so at that point, my faith was limited, and I wasn't dating any girls or anything. It was just my thing. My God, I guess, was baseball.
Yeah,
and that's what I did. I just played and trained and tried to get better, and that kind of didn't leave much room for anything else.
Howard Johnson's our guest here on Sports Spectrum. So a lot of people don't remember your years with the Tigers unless you're a big Detroit Tiger fan, but you had 3 seasons there, and you were a member of a World Series title in that 1984 year where you were kind of a part-time player, I think, on that team. But what was that like at the age of 23, and all of a sudden you're a World Series champion for the first time? And I want to talk about the Mets, obviously, for a variety of reasons in a second. But the 84 team, you had a taste of the World Series before anybody else when you got to that 86 Mets. What was that 84 team like?
It was great. I mean, the players were unbelievable. Yeah. I'd met a lot of great guys over there when I first came up, and a few of them took me under their wing and tried to help me and develop me as a player and a major league ball player, which is what I craved. Yeah. And I guess just being a part of it, I got 350 at bats that year. I played quite a bit. Didn't play a lot down the stretch, but I was a part of the team. Had some moments that year that helped the team win, and felt like I was definitely part of the group. And it was a surprise to me when I got traded, but I was thrilled to be coming to New York.
Well, you came at a good time. I mean, it was 84 when Dwight Gooden arrives, and the year before was Darryl, and the Mets of that 83 to 89 years, 84 to 89 were, I think I did the math last night because all of a sudden I'm with Darryl Strawberry and Howard Johnson, and my mind starts thinking about those teams. And I think the least amount of wins they had in a season from 84 to 89 was 89 wins. Jeez. So every year you're winning 90 games and you're having a great run. What was that like to arrive in New York? And you were there in 85 when you didn't win it all, and then, of course, the 86 team. But arriving in New York, is that a big culture shock for you? Going from Detroit's a big city, but New York's a different beast.
Yeah, there's nothing like New York. Well, I was very, very happy because I hit home runs and I stole bases. I did that in the minor leagues with the Tigers. Yep. And so that was always a part of my game. I always felt like the National League game was more suited for me. And maybe I was just watching the Phillies and just the AstroTurf and all that, watching the games, how fast they were. Yeah. It was just different, and I enjoyed that, and to be able to go to a National League team, and that was like a dream come true for me. I'd met Davey Johnson before when I was in high school. I went to a camp in Clearwater, and he was there, and got to meet him and a few other guys, ex-Philly guys, and so, finally getting traded over, I talked to Jay Horwitz. He called me on the phone. He goes, "Hey, we're happy to have you." Talked to Davey Johnson, and he was going to give me a chance to play, and it just worked. It was going to work out great. I was very excited.
You ever seen? I still think about the way that '86 team. It was like being a member of the Beatles and all the different people that I've met. I've met Doc. I've met Darryl. I actually had a long conversation years ago with Gary Carter about that team, and it was so unique. And I always tell people it wasn't just the 86 team. It was the era of basically 85 to 88, we'll say, of what it was like to walk around and be a rock star in the world of baseball. And you were a part of that. You had some good years there. What was that like when you started to see that come about and you're all of a sudden, in many ways, the most hated team?
Yeah.
Most targeted team, but the most successful team in baseball.
Yeah, and I think that's the world, right? It wants to defeat success. I think that's what I think. I think there's an issue with that, and
we see it with the Patriots in football. You see it with any really good, successful, long sustaining team. It's like, we want to knock them off,
knock them off, get them off the pedestal.
Yeah,
and so the Mets were clearly in that genre because everybody hated us. They hated the curtain calls. They hated the fact that we were cocky. Mm-hmm. They hated all of it. We almost won in 85. I remember in 86, the team made some trades in the offseason and brought some guys over, and it was like, okay, here we go, We started off, I think, 1-3 or 2-3 or something, people in New York were already upset.
After 5 games.
5 games, like it wasn't even a full. It was like the first road trip of the year.
Yeah,
and I remember we had the Welcome Home Met dinner downtown every year, and Keith Hernandez stood up and he talked and he said, "Everybody, just don't worry about it. We got this thing. We're going to win the World Series this year." And sure enough, we did.
Yeah.
But it was just that vote of confidence that we felt that, hey, we got this. And sure enough, our talent, kind of took over, and we started rolling. And it was crazy. And it was one of those times, rare times, I should say, that the Mets outshadowed the Yankees. It wasn't a Yankee town; it was a Met town, and it really was through and through, because the Yankees were having their issues, and the Mets were clearly up and coming, and the fans and everybody just kind of like gravitated towards that group.
They had so many different personalities on that club. We know about Darryl, we know about Doc, we know about even Gary Carter, Keith Hernandez. Roger McDowell comes to mind, those kind of personalities. Where was your personality in that mix? You were kind of the quiet guy, right?
Yeah, I'm a great support staff. I'm the good, what's Johnny Carson's guy that claps all the time? Ed McMahon. I'm the perfect Ed McMahon.
Yeah.
I'll laugh at all the jokes. I'll be in there helping out every prank if I can. I might be an idea guy. Hey, why don't we do this?
Yeah.
I'm all in on that, and that's kind of where I was. I wasn't the late night causing trouble person. Although I like to have a good time, but I wasn't out at night after games like
some of the guys.
The reputation of our team. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that leads me to a couple things. I would love to get your take on Darryl Strawberry first. Darryl's here at the conference that we're both at right now, and he's done his life. It's just from a fan perspective, but now being able to know him is incredible to watch how God has worked in his life to not just get sober and not just kind of clean his act up, but to be an evangelist for the gospel. I mean, he's just incredible in the way he preaches the word. But you knew him way back when, too.
Yes.
Different Darryl Strawberry, I'm guessing, than now. But what's your sort of reflection of playing with that guy and the talent that he had, and then watching kind of this come in a weirdly full circle way with you and him at a conference, for baseball players in Christ?
I never thought about that, Jace. You're right, though. It's the fact that we're here, and I got to listen to him preach the gospel last night to a bunch of guys. Both of you guys did a great job bringing that out, and really Darryl was able to show his the passion that he has for the gospel, the passion he has for speaking the word to guys and especially athletes that may be going through some issues.
Sure.
Putting things in perspective. Back in those days, I loved Darryl. I always got along with Straw. Didn't matter. Whatever trouble he got in, good or bad, didn't matter. Straw was always one of my guys, and we always got along good and never had any issues to get with each other. Pulled for each other genuinely, and he went through some tough times for sure. And he wasn't alone. There was other guys involved, with some of the stuff going on, and
of course
there's still stuff going on now, I think. But we're hopeful that the word, lands on fertile
some of the
ground.
Guys. Yeah,
because
I know what you mean.
And the thing is, Jason, is that, I mentioned earlier about the world, it wants to tear down success, and it wants to tear down Darryl as well.
Sure.
It's going to be.
He says he hears that a lot, like, oh, this guy's out preaching the gospel. Okay, he'll fall eventually.
Yeah.
Because of what he's been through. Yeah. The world's out there to do that.
100%. It's gonna. They're the devil's trying right now, and Straw has a tough road, tough way, because those arrows are coming, but I feel like he's in a good spot to fight them off. He's got a good foundation, sounds like. There's a lot of teammates, to be honest with you, and he probably would admit the same thing. There are teammates that probably question, whether or not it's legitimate or not.
Sure.
I follow Straw on Instagram. I know he preaches everywhere. I know he travels around, and he's promoting the gospel in different ways. And that's the first time I heard him speak live. And it really hit me, because I really believe that it's legit. and he's impacting people's lives, because if it wasn't real, I think guys would probably be onto it.
They'd see through it quickly.
Yeah, especially in baseball, because players you can't fool players.
Yeah.
And I think if he was up there and it wasn't genuine, then somebody would probably pick up on it.
How about a guy like Gary Carter, who I even asked Darryl about Gary, when we had him on the show here a couple months ago, and he talked about not realizing the influence and the seeds that were being planted in Darryl's life when he was playing with Gary Carter, but how genuine Gary was in living for Jesus even back then. What are your reflections on Gary and just, where he was and maybe his impact on you from a man of faith perspective?
Yeah, he was, a lot of criticism of Gary, that very much in the limelight, wanted the camera, always smiling, the ivory soap thing, 99.9% pure, right? So it's, kid was kid. And some of us, myself included, and I hate to even admit that, but question it sometimes. Is it real? Is it genuine? I think when you're with teammates on a daily basis for that long and that kind of confined area over amount of time, years, right? You start to learn like who's real and who isn't. Mm-hmm. And I learned. I rode in the ballpark a lot with Gary. We lived kind of the same area in Long Island, and Gary was real. And he was hurt by some of the things that were said about him. He was hurt by the fact that, maybe he didn't, always get the recognition he deserved on the team. Him and Keith, both those guys were the leader. There was, to me, it didn't matter who was the leader. Yeah. I played third base. I played short. Out there, Keith was my leader because I had to rely on him a lot. I wasn't the best defender, and he saved me a lot, But I always talked to Gary about, hitting. I talked to Gary about, the game. I just tried to pick his brain. We'd ride into the ballpark together, to and from the ballpark. So there was a lot of things with Gary that I learned, but he was genuine, and he made impact on players without him knowing it. And I think that he won't, the fact that Keith and Darryl and those guys now can say that, they missed the guy and that they really, really misjudged him, says a lot.
We'll get back to our conversation with Howard Johnson in just a minute, but want to tell you a little bit more about our friends at Ronald Blue Trust, our newest partner with us here at Sports Spectrum and sponsoring the podcast. We do appreciate Ronald Blue Trust. They are awesome. Their company's certified financial planning professionals offer comprehensive financial planning and investment management services based on biblical principles. That's what it's about. To individuals and families across the U.S. who are beyond the debt problem stage, but they want to be good stewards of your wealth, of their wealth. Do you want to be good stewards of your wealth? I know I do. And having someone like Ronald Blue Trust to offer these comprehensive financial services and objective advice is exactly what I need, and it may be what you need. So what we want is for you to go check their website, ronblue.com, ronblue.com, and learn more about the great work they are doing. We trust them. We believe in them. I think you will too. Check it out, Ronald Blue Trust, ronblue.com. Let's get back to our conversation with two-time Major League Baseball All-Star, 1986 New York Mets World Series champion Howard Johnson, as we continue our conversation discussing the legacy and remembering his teammate, Gary Carter. As we get older, we look back, you kind of see the plan that God had on the lives of all of us. And as you look back, you're able to kind of, not repent, but just kind of be able to reconcile or look back and say, we were so young and dumb, and now, kind of being able to kind of get back into that group. Were you able to do that with Gary? Not that you had any issues with him, but just be able to kind of look back and say, okay, that was just then, but now we're talking about a guy, because it seems like even later in his life, before he passed, that nobody could say a bad word about him.
Yeah.
Is that what you kind of saw too? Yeah,
pretty much. I mean, there was nothing, kid was genuine. There was a realness to him that I think over time bears itself out, You can't run that kind of scam on people very long before it comes out. And if it's not real, you're going to do something that's going to make it known that it's not real.
Yes.
And over time, I think Gary made it very clear that it was real.
Yeah.
And you can just by the fact that the testimonies from guys that talk about him now,
Right. Yeah.
Even the guys that aren't Christians,
Mm-hmm.
that they recognize that Gary was who he was. He's genuine. He's a real person. That's just the way he reacted to things. And in the locker room, sometimes it didn't play well, but now that time has passed and he's gone, I think players look at it now and say, "Wow, really." Maybe they shouldn't have gotten on him. Maybe they should have listened to him more. But I don't know. It's just one of those things that, looking back, the kid was real, and he did talk about his faith, and he tried to do the right thing.
Yeah, I remember watching a YouTube clip recently of an interview. I think it was with Bob Costas, a very young Bob Costas, in the locker room after you guys won it all. And there's Gary Carter, and he's got like champagne all over him. And Bob asked him about how he's feeling, and he literally goes to Jesus Christ right away as the first thing he says. He's thanking the Lord. And I think back then you didn't hear it maybe even as much now because of the media and the technology and the way that cameras are always on you back then. And it just showed me, even back in that time, in that moment, being able to kind of point to Christ first was pretty cool. But I want to ask you about your faith, because you mentioned you thought you had accepted Christ, or you thought you were a Christian and all these other things. So something clicks for you, Howard, at some point, whether it's during your career or after your career, when God starts to reveal yourself to him and it becomes even more real to you. Can you walk us through this journey of faith and where it's taken you to today?
Yeah, I think it was like 90 or 91, and my wife had accepted Christ. She had met some people that were strong Christians on Long Island, and she went to church, and of course we're playing, so I'm not around as it is.
Right. And
so she accepts Christ. Her faith was rewarded, and she tried to tell me about it. And I understand, and I was happy for her, but I felt like maybe she was kind of bringing that out of me, that I wasn't a Christian, that I say I was a Christian, maybe I'm not,
Yeah.
It's not that works, is required, but it would show more in your life.
Well, there's fruit in your life.
Yeah, there's fruit in your life.
That's what the Bible says. You see the fruit of the Spirit come out of a person.
I couldn't see any fruit. I couldn't see any fruit that I was producing.
Yeah.
And so I agreed to go to Bible study with her. So we went one night. We must have had a day game or an off day or something. I went, and the message that day in the Bible study was on Job. So I'm starting to get it from all kinds of ways, and
consider my servant Job.
Man, thinking, do I really want? Is this really what I want?
Yeah.
But it made me question, where I was in my faith, and eventually I realized that even though I'd made a lips, confession, probably what was missing was my life and my actions. What was my fruit? Am I bearing any fruit at all? I didn't want to be fake about it. If I say I'm a Christian, I want to act like one, and I want to be like one. I want to raise my children in a Christian home. I want my wife to be, proud of a Christian husband, and do all the things that was required. And so I made the decision, to accept Christ again, and ask him to forgive me for everywhere I'd been and what I had done, and just cleanse my heart and just restore me. And that's what happened.
Did you see a change from that? Like we talked about the fruit, right? Did you start to see fruit kind of building up inside? And I'm not saying, again, it's about works, but are you starting to see a change in the heart? I think we even heard a message last night that it starts with the heart. Yeah. Did you see that?
I did.
Yeah.
I felt it too. I saw it. It's like, man, I'm starting to think about things differently, more in line with what I really believe. And it was easy because we had some good Christian friends out on Long Island, so I was able to hang around with them.
That's good.
And so I was getting fed, spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
My wife was growing as a Christian. The kids were going to church, and of course they were all real young. But yeah, we were full on.
So at this point, you're 31, 32, somewhere in there. You're well into your career, but you still got a few years left as a baseball player. Was there any kind of tug or nudge for you to figure out how to bring that renewed faith, we'll say, into your journey as a baseball player? Like, are you suddenly part of chapel services and going to that and maybe being a veteran leader both on the field, but spiritually wise? Are you starting to see opportunities like that increase?
Yeah, Jason, it was. Things were happening. You know, I was a player. I was a veteran player with the Mets at that point. I'd had good seasons already. So, you know, I carried some weight. So if I said anything in the media, you know, it made you know, some kind of news, not necessarily breaking news, but just
people were listening.
People were listening, you know. So I would talk about my faith. And I remember in spring training, I talked to writers about my experiences in the off season and how, you know, my faith had been strong, and you know, they put it as, you know, you find God, but really what you do is you come home, you come back to God. And I felt like it was important for me to at least be public about my faith, because that's what is required, you know. If we're not public about it, then Christ isn't going to be there advocating on our behalf. He's not going to be there.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be public with it, and I was, and it did. I don't know. Like, I think the Mets were going through a period of time where we weren't very good. It was kind of a weeding out. Some guys were coming and going. Free agents came, didn't work out as well.
Yes.
Management guys got fired, and we hired some guys. I felt like there was kind of a feeling of they didn't want Christians around.
Really?
Yeah, not saying that I wasn't resigned because of that, but I just felt like the locker room wasn't really on that page. You know?
Interesting.
And I think that if the locker room is not going to be all Christian, then at least let the guys who are let them be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't have to make it tough on them.
Right.
And that's what I felt like the locker room was kind of becoming difficult. And so it was kind of clear to me that I wasn't going to be there much longer.
Yeah, and I know your time was up. That had to be tough. After 9 seasons with the Mets and a lot of success, you saw the ups and you saw the downs. So I'm sure it was tough to end your career with them in 1993. And then you play 2 more seasons. You're with the Rockies in 94. You're with the Cubs in 1995. And then suddenly you're not a current baseball player anymore. You're a former baseball player. And I want to ask you about that transition from playing the game to retirement. And I know you go into coaching, and we'll talk about your coaching journey in a second. But what was that transition like, finishing out your career in Chicago and then trying to figure out what's next?
Well, I didn't want to leave the Mets. It just kind of worked out that's what happened. It was very difficult to make that decision.
Yeah.
I had 2 teams that were pursuing me, the Rockies and the Reds. And it basically just came down to money at that point.
Sure.
Davey Johnson was with the Reds, and Ray Knight was one of the coaches. And those guys called me, and they really tried to convince me to come over there. And looking back on it, maybe that's one regret I have, that I didn't go there because those guys knew who I was as a person, as a player, as a person.
Sure.
And, you know, maybe I would have had more success. And Cincinnati is a great place to play. But I went to Colorado, and we had moved out west. I had never really been west of, New York. You know, grew up in Florida, lived in New York. We had moved out to California, so I was kind of intrigued by the West Coast, and so we decided to go to Colorado. And that was a difficult transition because, you know, my body was starting to fail me, and I'm only, you know, when I went to Colorado, I was 33.
Yeah.
But physically, it was just, I mean, I'm not a big person, Jason. You can see me, right? But I ran, I stole, I dove head first all the time. I played hard. I tried to do those things.
Yeah.
I swung hard, you know, both sides of the plate, and it just took its toll on me. Eventually, my body just quit, and it took the life out of me. You know, my game was going, and I didn't like it. And so after the 95 season, I went to winter ball down in Puerto Rico for a month. And after that was over with, came home. Didn't really have any opportunity to play the next year. and went into coaching. Actually, not many guys know this, but in '96, I was the hitting coach in Butte, Montana, with the Rays, Devil Rays organization. The first year that they had a minor league system.
Yeah, they didn't even have a major league team.
Because I was from Clearwater.
Right.
And I had people down there that knew the Rays people, and they had wanted me to come on and become a coach in the system, and so I did. And so I went to Butte.
Cool.
Yeah, in the Pioneer League.
Did that help you with the transition, like to quickly get into coaching from playing?
Yes. Yeah. It wasn't for me to sit around. I didn't like that at all. I have other interests. I like doing things, but that wasn't me just to like go hit the links. You know, I'm not a very good golfer even still, but it's so I wasn't going to play that every day. So I went right into coaching, and I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. But that's when I kind of rediscovered, you know, from a faith perspective.
Yeah,
I was still on doing okay. You know, I was doing all right. I was happy with life, and I felt God had provided my family and myself, and I was trying to do the right thing. And maybe that's the problem. I was trying so hard to do the right thing, but started taking BP and stuff, and guys wanted me to take swings, so I took swings, and I was driving the ball all over the place, and so I decided maybe I'll try to come back and play one more year.
Okay. And
that led into '97, and I remember Joe McIlvaine was the GM with the Mets in that year, and I called him and I said, "Hey Joe, listen, I want to try to come back and play. I want you to come send somebody out to look at me."
Huh.
And so they sent a scout out there. Is it Bob Johnson? I forget. Harry was his name, but he came out. Bob was his son. Harry came out.
Okay.
He's a scout out in Southern California. I met him. He put me through a workout, ground balls. I threw, I hit. I was killing the ball, and he called Joe and he recommended that they sign me. So they brought me to spring training in '97.
Okay. And
no promises. I didn't ask for any, and they gave me every opportunity to win a spot. And at the end of the day, Bobby Valentine was a manager. At the end of the day, at the end of spring training, he brought me in. He says, "Look, man, I don't think we're going to be able to keep you." And I said, "Well, I appreciate it." And all spring, I felt like my timing was a little bit off after missing a year. Physically, I felt okay. I'll tell you a funny story. Literally 3 days before spring training in '97, trying to make the team, right?
Yeah.
So I'm living in Lake Arrowhead, California, which is in the Inland Empire, San Bernardino Mountains.
Okay.
My buddy Dave was hitting me ground balls. 3 days before I'm to leave to go to Florida, I'm going to catch a ground ball as a backhand. Ball hits a rock of some or whatever in the ground, comes up, hits me in the face.
Oh.
My face is like, my nose is pushed sideways. I'm bleeding. I go to the hospital. I got a broken nose.
Oh.
It was not good. I'm thinking, now what am I going to do?
What are you doing, God? Right?
What am I going to do here?
Yeah.
So my wife calls a doctor down in San Diego. I'd go down there. He sets my nose. You know, now it's 3 days. My eyes are getting black. I look terrible. And I go to spring training, and I'm trying to make the team.
Yeah, a 37-year-old, 36-year-old
36-year-old guy, trying to make the ball club. I don't want to have any fear of anything, but now like ground balls were coming at me, and I'm thinking, oh God, if he hits me in the face, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
So I never could quite get past that. And yeah, so
then you knew it was over.
I knew it was going to be over.
Let's talk about coaching real quick for the next few minutes about going into coaching. You were known as a great player, certainly a 3-time member of the 30-30 club, 30 homers, 30 stolen bases. You go into coaching, and I'm going to fast forward even to getting back into the majors as a coach and what that was like for you to be. I know you were the Mets hitting coach in 2007 to 2011, and so you were back in the majors. You were back as a Met in many ways. What was that like to return as a coach? And then how's the faith evolving for you during these stages?
Well, at this point, my faith was probably lukewarm at best. Still believing in the Lord. Yeah. You know, read the Bible every now and then, go to church when I could with the kids and the wife. And, so get into coaching almost immediately. and went into pro scouting first, and then went into coaching, and worked my way up. Worked my way up through the minor leagues. Got an opportunity to coach in the big leagues with the Mets.
Yeah.
And I was extremely happy and proud that I was able to get that opportunity, and I thank the Mets for that. And it was awesome because I think I came through at a time where it was kind of like a glory days for the Mets organization as a farm system, because guys were coming up through it.
Yeah, they were.
David Wrights, I had that guy for every year.
Yeah.
Jose Reyes for a little bit. We had some guy, Angel Pagan, Daniel Murphy. All these guys were coming up through that were turned out to have pretty good careers.
Yeah.
And getting to see Murph here at PAO has been awesome.
Yeah.
And so, got a chance to do that. I was going to chapel. My faith was steady. Remember one guy, Beltran, Carlos, was
now the Mets manager.
Christian. Now he's a Mets manager, and he's a strong Christian guy.
Yeah.
Loved it. Loved our chapel that we had there. And it was just fantastic from a faith standpoint. And then the bottom falls out after the season in 2010, and I ended up leaving in the spring of 2011, and was out of baseball for a couple of years, trying to, licking my wounds a little bit.
You said lukewarm, though. So you say that.
Yeah.
So we're in 2019, getting ready to 2020. So that's not that long ago. That's 10 years ago, where this lukewarm has taken place. So into your 50s now, as you come into, when does God truly reveal himself? Like, when does that lukewarm go away and it starts to become just warm, and really all in with him?
Well, it doesn't happen overnight.
Of course not.
I wish it did.
It's a process. I always tell people.
I wish it did, Jason.
Yeah.
But I feel like God is still working on me. He's still working on me. I struggle.
We never make it, Howard, right? We're never fully
we're never fully. I'm definitely a whip, a work in progress.
That's it. Yeah.
So I feel like God is still working on me. And my wife a couple years ago, she's like, let's go to PAO. Let's go back to that. We've been years before. And so she did all the legwork and everything. We figured out how we could make it and come here last year, and was unbelievable. And it kind of, even though my faith was there, it wasn't strong. I didn't really have an outlet.
Yeah.
And being around a bunch of guys in this atmosphere, I think it gives you clarity as the road to go. How you actually do it. That's one thing we learn here. We learn, what does it being a Christian look like? How is it in your daily life? And get a chance to see players here that I just watched on, either on television or I coached against them. And some of my guys I've coached have been here, and get a chance to see them in a different way where Christ is the center. And that's the thing that kind of like clicked for me. It's like God has to be in the center. Christ has to be in the center. I have to make an effort to understand who Christ is. I know I'm his.
Right.
I know that part is done. I don't question that anymore. But he's not done with me as a person.
Right.
And I have to make the decision, like Straw said last night, to get off the fence. I have to make that decision.
Yeah.
Am I going to get off the fence, or am I going to stay on it?
So we fast forward to 2020, and right now, as we talk, you're without a job. You were the hitting coach. You're still in coaching. You were a hitting coach with the Nashville Sounds last year, AAA affiliate, and now it's 2020, and you don't have a job. And so what's next? And maybe where is your faith in this? Trying to trust God when there's so much uncertainty. Again, we talk to players a lot about uncertainty, but it's also former players who are coaching that there's uncertainty as well.
Yeah, it is uncertain, Jason, and I think that, or actually I know that when things happen that we don't understand, whether it's a job or an illness or death in the family or whatever, that's when God is at his best, and it has strengthened my faith. And it's made me realize that there are more important things than having a job. You know what I mean? I'm gonna be okay.
Yeah.
I'm fine. I can provide for my family. I want to stay in coaching because it allows me to impact players, young men, at a time that's very critical to them because I was in their shoes, so I know what it's like.
Sure.
And I enjoy the relationships that I've made with these guys over the years, and I want to continue to do that. And so I'm hopeful that an opportunity comes up. I don't know where baseball is going right now. It's a little bit disheartening in some ways, but I also know that baseball is going to change, and it's going to change for the best. I mean, listen, I have to be better at what I do. That's the way I look at it from a sports standpoint.
Yeah.
But from a Christian standpoint, my goal is to understand Christ better and to let it live out of my life more. And I have to be able to surrender to that all the time. I cannot let my will get in the way.
As we wind down, we asked this question as the last question to all of our guests here on Sports Spectrum. Kind of with everything that you've just said, what are you learning from God right now? Like, what's the lesson that He's teaching you in the season of life that He has you? And I know we talked about being a work in progress, and that's a great lesson. But is there another lesson or something that God's been tugging on your heart on and just showing you over these last 3-4 months, years, whatever?
Yeah. I would say the lesson that He's trying to teach me is that I have to find Him first. That I have to get my own path straight. That He wants to use me in some way, but He's not going to provide that door until I make that commitment. And I feel like I've made the commitment, but that door hasn't opened yet. Maybe another door is going to open. I'm not sure, but I have a peace about it. That's why I know that everything's going to be fine, because He's provided financially every different which way. Beautiful family, healthy kids, grandkids, beautiful wife, married 36 years. So we're doing fine, but I want to be better in other ways, and God's kind of revealing those ways right now, and that's kind of what I'm embracing. The baseball stuff will take care of itself. I'm still going to be involved in baseball in some capacity, but who knows what? But I'm still right now trying to do what's right, what Christ. He died for us. I want to make sure that message is strong in my mind, and I want to influence people in some way.
He is Howard Johnson, 2-time Major League Baseball All-Star, 2-time World Series champion, 3-time member of the 30-30 Club. I love that club, by the way.
Yeah, it's cool.
That was a big deal when you got that 30-30 Club back in '87.
Surprised a lot of people.
It does, right? Yeah, but it's a great thing to be a part of, and not many are a part of it multiple times. So as a Mets fan growing up, and still certainly a Mets fan today, thank you for the memories, but really just appreciate your vulnerability, transparency, and honesty in coming on the podcast and talking about your relationship with the Lord. Thanks so much.
Jason, I appreciate it. Thank you.
That was Howard Johnson, and as a Mets fan, that was a treat for me to be able to sit down with one of the guys that you rooted for as a kid and learn about his journey of baseball, but even more, his journey of faith. And that's really where I am right now, is I want to hear about these stories of these guys that played, the guys that I watched. I want to hear how Jesus has got a hold of them. And I thought Howard was really interesting in what he was saying, especially for me, it was an encouragement to hear him talk about his struggles. Nobody's perfect. I think he called himself a whip, a work in progress. And that's what we all are. We really have to remember that. The day we think we got it figured out is the day that we put God on the back burner, because we don't have it figured out. And that's why we need Him. And Howard Johnson was really good in talking about his need for Christ and trusting Him with his journey. Really appreciate him for joining us here on Sports Spectrum. We are, again, presented by Ronald Blue Trust. We love what they're about. If you have any questions or any needs financially, man, they're the place to turn. Check out their website, ronblue.com, ronblue.com. They're applying biblical wisdom, the Ronald Blue Trust advisors, and technical expertise to help their clients make wise financial decisions, to experience clarity and confidence, and leave a lasting legacy. Again, check them out at ronblue.com. Thanks so much for listening. We really do appreciate you tuning in. For this podcast, we want to encourage you to click the subscribe button so that you never miss an episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast. There's been a ton of episodes out there, tons of interviews. Hope you'll go back and listen to as many as you can, including Howard's teammate, Darryl Strawberry, who's been on the podcast recently. Click that subscribe button and never miss an episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast. And lastly, we want to encourage you to go to our website, sportsspectrum.com, sportsspectrum.com. All of the content can be found there at our home base, sportsspectrum.com. sportsspectrum.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time right here on Sports Spectrum. I do hope you all have a great rest of your day, and stay safe.